Welcome to The Unbridled Woman with your host, Deanne Rose. Dive deep into the essence of your feminine light, harness the strength that lies within, and rise beautifully into your authentic power. Now, here's Deanne.
Hello, Unbridled Women. Welcome to our sacred circle today. I am just giddy with excitement about our show today. This is one of my most favorite subjects, and I love this woman who is my guest today. I am so looking forward to our conversation. As always, let's opening our circle up today with a prayer. Dear universe, I release freely what no longer serves me. I am embracing the unknown and welcoming change. I am expanding into my unlimited potential. I clear this space, this body, this mind of any intentions that are not aligned with my highest good. I fill my heart with love and light, and so it is. Now inviting you all, if you can, to close your eyes, and we're going to take 3 big, deep belly breaths just to really get present in our time here together. So a big inhale through your nose, and a slow exhale through your mouth, just noticing your body start to soften and relax. Taking a deep breath in, filling up your heart and your chest. Exhaling, just feeling a little bit more grounded to your chair or wherever you're sitting or laying down. And one more deep breath in. And hold that breath in for just a couple seconds. And letting it all out slowly. So before we officially open our circle here, I just wanted to give a shout out to our amazing sponsor, Native Path. They are an amazing company doing amazing things in this world. So please take advantage of their generous discount offer on their collagen. I am a very happy customer myself. It is out of this world. So as I said, I am excited and also honored. There's a beautiful woman in front of me today. I wish you all could see how beautiful she is the beautiful Daphne Paras. Daphne leads people by igniting the fire within them. She has found great satisfaction in facilitating corporate and private workshops, as well as one-on-one coaching. She excels at holding space and guiding people deep into the wisdom of their bodies, where she believes the magic happens. Daphne leads by example, often citing that she is both the teacher and the student, always on a mission to learn and expand more. She has learned how to go deeper within herself and in turn take others deeper using tools such as breathwork, meditation, and a variety of guided practices. She is definitely passionate about helping people identify where trauma lives in the body and using gateways to clear and heal it. Her journey has led her to design and invent The Seeker, a sacred self-exploration and pleasure tool. And she is on a mission to remove the shame and guilt and normalize open conversation and communication around sexuality, as well as inspire living in pleasure. And that is our topic today, women's sexuality and pleasure and just full expression. So welcome, my dear. So just so our listeners know, just to plan for our circle today, we're going to have Daphne share a little bit about her unbridled story. And then in the second half, this beautiful woman and I will chat a little bit more about the importance of women connecting to and expressing through their sexuality and pleasure. So I always ask my guests, Daphne, what does the word unbridled mean to you?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me today. It's really an honor and such a blessing to have you in my life. Unbridled to me really is about living in our authentic state, not trapped or restricted in any way by social or cultural norms.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and it's so, gosh, I'm just kind of like reminiscing, like most of my life, I feel like I've lived in the box.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where most of us feel comfortable too. Like we've been so conditioned and trained that way that that's our normal state of being. And when we go against it, it's almost like, oh no, what am I doing? What am I doing something wrong? And
Yeah.
It's been generations of that, right? Of that conditioning and those agreements that are unconscious. We're signing up for these things without even knowing it.
Yeah, that is so true. That's so true. So before we go off on a little tangent, which I want to come in back, and yeah, I would love for you to share with beautiful audience out there a story about your unbridled story. Yeah, what's on your heart? What would you like these women to know about your journey, and that might actually inspire and resonate with them?
Absolutely. What's the strongest unbridled story that I have was when I visited some pyramids in 2016. And I was with my husband at the time and my two young daughters. And the next day, I thought I was dying. And I didn't realize it. Now it's what I believe was the call of the goddess. And it shook up my entire life in pretty catastrophic ways. I got back from Mexico, cried for 3 weeks straight. The kind of crying that was just constant. It wasn't sobbing, and I'm not a crier. So it was so bizarre. And I'm like, what is going on? And I had all these realizations about my marriage. My husband could not be physically intimate with me or sexually intimate, not kiss me. We would have sex maybe once or twice a year if I could take advantage of him. And so all of these realizations came flooding in from where I had always made the agreement, I'll never put my kids through a divorce, to, wow, if one of my girls comes to me and says, Mom, I'm in a sexless, loveless marriage, what do I do? It's like, oh yeah, that's what I showed you. And the universe responded with all these different support people and teachings coming at me in these 3 weeks. And I learned to really take the guidance. And it was this huge awakening for me and this huge realization, like, this is not the life I am meant to live. It was as if like the universe conspired with all of its energy to be like, stop on this path. There's a different path for you. And that was really the beginning of this awakened path that I've been living since 2016. Was this catastrophic event. What I thought was this horrific emotional breakdown is really what opened me up to all of the magic that I get to do in my life every day now.
Yeah, just the beginning of your hero's journey, right? Just
exactly.
knock down. So yeah, just having all of those emotions come up, and yeah, it seems like it must have been pretty unsettling.
It was unsettling. And, my personality type is the controller or the commander. I always had a plan, and it was always everybody's following this plan. If the universe put up a roadblock, I'd be like, I'm going to bulldoze that right down. And during this time, something happened where I intuitively knew, no, I have to listen now. I have to take this guidance. And it was really beautiful how it all showed up for me. And I followed the signs. I no longer bulldozed through that one-way sign. I no longer said, I'm going the other way. I don't care what you say. And really like tapping into that divine wisdom within. So I'm so grateful that it happened. But when I was in it, and I mean, a lot of moments since, when you choose that road that's less traveled, it's filled with discomfort, others that are very uncomfortable with your choices as well. It's not the easy path, but it's the path of alignment.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The easy path isn't the path to growth and expansion. It feels comfortable, but after a while, who wants to live in that? I would imagine it would get a little bit boring. And like you said, I mean, the body holds this stuff. It holds that discomfort of knowing it's not living an aligned life. The soul gets to express through the body that way. And I love how you mentioned that the goddess awakened you, because from what I'm hearing is a lot of your life just being a lot more in that masculine energy of pushing through. And then when she came to call, it was just like a force of, all right, I need to surrender and follow, like you said, follow the signs, follow my intuition, and having the courage to do that.
Exactly. I just got the chills when you were saying that, because it was like the first goddess that came in was like the destroyer, right? The Kali. It was like, we're shaking this all up. But then I had the holding and the allowing of the emotions and the tears and the people to show up. So it was like I felt held the whole process. And it was crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone in my orbit was like, are you okay? Because I literally cried. I'd be at school pickup and tears would be coming down my face. And I'd tell people, yeah, I just held them in for too long. And these women would hug me and say, I know that feeling. It was like everybody knew what I was going through and almost wanted to go through that too. Like, wow, I want that, because they saw that it was transforming me.
Yeah. Yeah. That is remarkable. So where do you think it was that goddess energy that gave you that strength, that courage to kind of reclaim yourself through this?
100%,
Something else.
100%. And it was interesting because I had a friend gift me a session with an intuitive during that 3-week, breakdown period. And the first thing she said on the phone was, you need to harness your goddess energy. And I was like, what does that mean? I mean, I had no idea what that meant. I'm Googling books on goddess energy, but absolutely, I was so in my masculine, and it wasn't my fault. I mean, I had a husband that traveled for work 5 days a week. He wasn't present when he was home. I did all of the parenting, all the mothering, the diapers, the trash, the food. I mean, everything, which is all masculine. I didn't have a space to ever be held in that feminine goddess energy. And it completely cut me off from my essence. I mean, my sexuality, forget that. I mean, I had completely severed that connection, but even just the feminine essence. And when I started doing the work to heal and recalibrate and grow, the only time I could connect to any feminine energy was thinking of when I was breastfeeding my babies. I mean, it was like the only thing I could think of, like, where am I ever feminine or goddess like? Oh yeah, when I'm holding my baby and nursing them. That was it. Like, in my whole life, those were the only places I could tap into, but I knew it was in there.
Yeah, I think that's such helpful guidance for women who feel like they're always in their masculine, because I resonate as well. And it's probably why we became friends and got into the same program that we were called was, yeah, being in a partnership where I was also doing everything and lost my sexuality, my femininity, and yeah, wasn't even on the radar of like something that I was even needed to nourish. I was like, I don't even know where it is. I don't have time to look for it.
Exactly.
But yeah, for you, just like, oh, hey, where I know there's some femininity in me somewhere where just that little piece, okay, tapping into that, tapping a little bit, putting focus on, okay, how does this feel? How does it feel when I'm breastfeeding my babies? Like, what does my body feel like? What are those sensations that are coming up for me? And then being able to tap into that more and more outside of yourself.
Yeah. And it was really beautiful for me because I had stopped breastfeeding when this awakening happened, but I could remember those feelings and I still felt very strong and powerful. I think some women are afraid of that feminine goddess energy because they're like, no, I want to be a badass. And it's like breastfeeding your baby, that's badass, but it's also really nurturing and feminine and gentle as well. So it was such a good image for me to hold on to because it was that strong, powerful goddess energy, not, what we think of like frolicking through the fields, which is beautiful too. But, like it would have been a harder shift for me if that was the only vision I had. I don't think I could have imagined myself at that point in my life frolicking through fields. Now I could.
Right. Yeah. So it's almost here, it's also finding another power within you that is a little bit more softer. And I love,
receiving.
Let's speak about that, because I think there is such a stereotypical feminine energy of, oh, you sit around and you lay around and listen to nice soft music and dance and you have a man take care of you, or, you just don't do anything and you're just being all the time. Yeah. So I can see why, one, it could be very difficult for a woman who is so much in a masculine to look at that and be like, hell no, like that doesn't even feel like anything remotely like I even want to do. So let me just stay where I'm comfortable. So yeah, how can we change this stereotypical, and maybe we could talk about those goddesses you mentioned, Kali, right? Like maybe it's those archetypes coming in.
Yeah, for me, I wasn't in the space to receive from a man because I didn't trust it. I didn't have a partner that I could receive from. Now that's very different for me. And the places I started to feel like a goddess was actually with my women friends, with my girlfriends, and in circles, and allowing someone to make me a cup of tea. Like, whoa, can a friend come over and wash my dishes or make me a cup of tea? And doing that for each other, especially, when you're momming all day, like I would have a friend come over and be like, just sit down, sweetheart. Let me make you a cup of tea and clean up your kitchen for you. And we're like, no, 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 I got that. I got that. But we don't have to.
Right.
And I think it was so much of that receiving energy, and the women that showed up for me, it was so beautiful. And I had some male friends that showed up for me and that wanted to help me with projects, and accepting we don't have to do it all. And I mean, think about time, previous time, and how we lived in villages and the women cooked together and laundered clothes together and raised children together. It was this communal thing, and now we're so separated. So I think that receiving piece is probably the most basic way to shift into more of that feminine goddess energy. And that's even at the grocery store. If someone offers you a cart, receiving it and saying thank you and doing it consciously instead of like going and getting a different one around them, or letting someone hold the door for you. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Start opening doors to receiving, really.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because, the universe wants to give us things. And,
Absolutely.
it's really coming into my mind. And actually, it's a question. So I'm curious, as you were opening more to this receiving and bringing in more of the feminine energy, did you notice like more manifestation in your life?
Of course. And, I don't know how directly it was connected to my invitation of receiving or just really being more connected to the guidance. But it did, and it still feels, whenever I'm totally aligned with my inner self, my heart space, my body, my intuition, your soul, whatever word resonates for you, the guidance comes and I've learned to follow it, even if it's a silly Facebook ad or, like different things pop up. Someone will reach out to you and say, oh, have you thought of this? Or let me invite you here. And you say yes when it feels aligned. And when I was living out of alignment, I didn't know what to say yes or no to. And that's probably why I was so exhausted all the time, as I was saying yes to too many things. Like you lose that discernment when you're not connected. And so being more connected to myself and that feminine goddess energy has helped me so much with that discernment. And then in turn, the manifestation and the energy, because I'm not losing energy everywhere saying yes to everything or feeling more scattered. It's like, okay, can I trust myself? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I love the word discernment. When you were speaking, I just had this flash. I was just watching something on Netflix the other day, and a little pop-up thing said, do you like, would you like more of this? Check yes, no, yes, this is me, I love it, or like, no, I hate it. And like, I think the universe does that for us, right? When we say yes to something, the universe is like, oh, would you like more of this? Okay, I'm going to give you more of this. As it's like you're clear on that. When you're not clear on your yeses and nos, the universe doesn't know what to give you. So it's just like this
100%.
crapshoot. It's like, how's this? Does this work for you? And you're like, oh, that sucks. I don't want that.
Well, and Deanne, how many times do we betray ourselves too by saying yes when it's really a no?
Mm-hmm.
Because we think we have to say yes. whether that's staying at home and raising your kids or going to work and leaving your kids with someone, like all of these cultural conditionings, they pollute our yeses and nos. And we're left really confused and depleted.
Yeah. So I'm just, so yeah. So when I know I'm kind of answering my question that I'm thinking of asking, but I know personally I got more clear when I started getting more in touch with my own sexuality.
Exactly.
And yeah.
I started with some certifications in warrior goddess facilitation. And in the level 2 certification, we did a month on sexuality. And we talked about how the womb space is the source of creativity for women. And when we disconnect from that, we're disconnecting our flow. And I was like, oh, wow. And it became my mission. I mean, I had completely severed myself from the waist down because I had so much hurt and sadness from being rejected by my husband that I just was like, fine, I'm not a sexual being. And I was really determined to reconnect to that. And I started like a sacred self-pleasure practice on Friday nights. It would be my Friday night date night. My kids would be, we eventually separated. My kids would be with him. And I would go to Whole Foods and buy, a steak and veggies and a sweet potato and watch a scary movie. And then, light candles or take a bath and like really consciously work on reconnecting to my sexuality and igniting it. And it was beautiful and amazing. And yeah, my clarity amplified, my essence amplified, my energy, my skin, everything starts falling into alignment. And it was a really fun time too.
Yeah, yes. Daphne and I met through Layla Martin's Sex, Love, and Relationship Coaching, which was the year-long program for us. And yeah, that was a 6-month deep dive into our own personal personal shadows and traumas. And yeah, so that was for me like a catalyst as well of, wow, I have been disconnected from this potent part of me that has been asleep. Like there was no life force. I remember being with one woman one time at some workshop, and similar to what you said, she's like, okay, connect to your womb and ask her what she needs. I'm like, how do I do that? Like, I don't even know what that actually means, or how do I connect? And talk about going out of comfort zone, right? I mean, I wasn't taught that, my self-pleasure was important. or not how to do it, but yeah, like, what does it mean to do? Like, I remember, I don't know if you remember this, like, it was in the program for me the first time, really, I guess, besides I ever, learning how to put a tampon in. I never looked at my vulva before. And now I get to, one of the practices I remember was like, take a mirror and just stare at her. And I was like, wow, this is really uncomfortable. And I was like, why is it uncomfortable for me to look at my own body? And then, talk about tears, like, oh, the sadness of like, oh my gosh, I was like in my late 40s at this point going through this program. It's like, oh my God, all this time. And what have I taught my daughters, right? Have I, done them a disservice as well? And so much guilt and shame were coming up around that.
And when I was going through this transition in my life and I mentioned these people showing up, I had one girlfriend that I confided in, and she's like, oh yeah, like I follow Layla Martin on YouTube, and I found one of her practices for a cervical orgasm. Had never tried it. And this was before I entered the program, but that's how I got connected to Layla. So I started following the cervical orgasm practice and I mastered it. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I went on this ski trip by myself, and there was a full length mirror on the closet. And I started to self pleasure and look in the mirror. And I had a lot of shame and guilt around my vulva. My sister had teased me when I was a little girl, and I made peace with her and I just studied her and touched her. And it was like really beautiful. And a day or two later, I had this epic sexual experience with this man that is what led me to invent the seeker, actually. And, I didn't connect the dots back then. It was like a year ago that I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, the first time I squirted was after I made peace with my pussy. Like, how cool is that? And so, really, and then obviously, when I was in Layla's program, like, we went so much deeper. But those were like the first inklings of her in my life. And that's why I said yes to the program, because I, on my own, was even able to crack open so many of those layers. And then obviously having all the support of her, the other coaches, and each other was really amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. What a blessing. What a blessing to have been part of that whole experience. So we're going to go into a short break. And yeah, thank you, Daphne. It's a beautiful, unbridled story that you've been sharing with us. And we've already kind of started getting a little bit into women's sexuality and pleasure. And so I'm looking forward to the second half where we'll dive a little bit more deeper into, female satisfaction. So I welcome our listeners to take a little break with us and then stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate you so, so much.
Welcome back to The Unbridled Woman with Deanne Rose. Have a question for Deanne or her guests? Join us on the show at 888-346-9141. That's 888-346-9141. Or email Deanne at theunbridledwomanrises@gmail.com. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back, dear sisters, to The Unbridled Woman. I am Deanne Rose, and I'm here with my inspiring guest, Daphne Paras, who has been sharing her story on her reclamation of her sexual unbridled woman. Yes, the first half, if you have missed it, has just been a juicy talk about women's sexuality, the importance of us connecting back to our pleasure, our self-pleasure, our bodies. And I want to go into the second half of really what this means for women, not only in the bedroom, but in life in general, and how connecting to your pleasure really affects how you show up in your life, in your relationships, your business, of course, and how when we can really claim our pleasure, how it also affects the men in our life. So let us go deeper. All right.
Deeper and juicier.
Yes. So, all right. So you're seeker.
Yes.
You're seeker let's talk a little bit about what that helps women find in themselves.
Yeah. So I mentioned that I had this, exceptional sexual experience after I had made, peace with my pussy in the mirror. I was 40 and my lover got me to squirt for the first time. And I was like, oh my gosh, how did this happen? And how did I not know my body could do this? And he was like, yeah, I know your body better than you. And on one hand, I was like, cool. And the other hand, I'm like, well, that's messed up. Like, I don't want a man knowing my body better than me. So I came home from that trip and I started really talking to my friends, anyone that I could, about, I was like a mad scientist about squirting. And like, has this ever happened to you? And where in your anatomy does this take place? And it was like this big mystery. And as I started asking different people about sexuality, I was realizing how little we knew about our anatomy. And it was like, well, what spot did he hit? I'm like, I don't know. Let me get a diagram. And I'm like, there's an O spot and an A spot. And someone's like, I didn't even know where my G spot was. And I mean, we're 40 and 50-year-old women, that have been sexually active and had babies. And I'm like, this is like basic health ed kind of stuff that we should be learning. So I wanted to recreate what he had done at home. And I didn't have any toys that could reach the spot that he did. So I did, I created, I'll show it to you. And a lot of people get intimidated by it. They're like, what, why is that so big? Because it looks kind of scary and big, but the way I designed it was that only one side at a time is inserted inside of you. And it's about exploring and kind of mapping the pleasure spots on your body. So many of us will have like a juicy experience with a lover where they graze an area, with their hand or their, penis or a toy. And it's like, oh, where was that? Well, I want women to be able to find that on their own. And so the one end is a little bit more curved and more shallow. And then the other end is less curved and goes deeper. And the design is to allow very little pressure here on the outside to push more pressure on the inside. Because as you know, when we were in our program, people were getting carpal tunnel from all the self-pleasure that they were doing. So I wanted something that was ergonomically designed to take the pressure off ourselves so we could really focus on the body. And I created like a PDF of the anatomy of a woman and showed my kids. And, everyone should know the inner workings of their body and own that space. So that was really, for me, it was like educational. I mean, of course it's sexual as well, but it's like really kind of reclaiming our own power to ourselves and knowing our body first and foremost before or independent of a lover.
Yeah, I so love that. And for our listeners, so the Seeker it's about look like an S shape.
I don't know. It's kind of hard to see with my background, isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, it looks like an S, but there is a little different curve on each of the curves for, like you said, for a different kind of penetration. And yeah, it's so nice because of the size that you can use that and not that use the wand for the pressure and not your hand and your wrists. And I love that, that lover had said, well, I know your body better than you do. And when I first got with my current partner now, we've been together since after my divorce. So when I came out of my divorce, like I said, I was not really connected to my sexuality at all. And my current partner asked me what I liked. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, well, what do you do? I'm like, I'm sure I'll like it because I don't know what I like, and you know what? I probably won't tell you that I don't like it because I really haven't found my voice yet. So it doesn't really matter, but it did matter because that was like the first, like, wow, someone actually asked me what I like. However, I didn't have an answer. And so that's why it's so important for women to understand their anatomy, understand their pleasure points, so you can communicate this to your partners because, they want to know. They want to know too. I think it's very empowering for women to say, I don't like this, but I like this. And I would assume we're talking heterosexual here, but, the man would be like, oh, thank goodness you told me so I don't have to play, guess this, and it takes a lot of pressure off the partner.
It takes pressure off, and it's also like a turn on. Like every man that I know wants to know the inner workings of a woman, wants to please her, wants to give to her. It's like this, yeah, I'm here for you. And when we give them that feedback, that it's exciting. They're like, awesome, I know what to do. Like, they're here to please us anyway. So we might as well tell them what we want to give them the map to our bodies to please us the best way in the way that we want to be touched or handled or whatever.
Yeah. And if they don't ask, you shouldn't be with them because they don't give a shit about your pleasure. It's more about them. So it's kind of that's a red flag. Like, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't share my temple body with this person because they're not in my best interest. And I think if they don't ask, you can still try to tell them, and maybe they're just too shy to ask also, but if they say no or don't after you ask them, that's a different scenario too. But, like maybe a lot of men have a lot of sexual shame and trauma too. The world has not been kind to them around education and what women want either. Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of men have been shamed as well. So yeah, it's men and women, we have a lot of sexual wounds. Definitely.
We sure do.
Yeah. So how can pleasure help us heal those wounds?
I think it begins even before pleasure, and it starts with reconnection. Even just using your breath to start reconnecting to your womb space, just bringing your awareness there. Some women have had so much trauma, they're not ready to go straight to pleasure, but bringing that awareness, opening up those channels, even breast massage, it's sensual, not necessarily sexual. They're like stepping stones, and working your way up to being able to touch yourself or look in the mirror. For those listening that's like, whoa, I can't do that. Like, you can get there. It might be baby steps, but you can get there. And when you lean into those places, the magic that happens, it's like unlocks pleasure for you in your body, even using just your breath. I did a breathwork exercise at a recent workshop that I facilitated, and this woman raised her hand and said, oh my gosh, I got so turned on just bringing my breath down there. I felt like I had to shut it down. And I was like, what would happen if we all walked around just a little bit more turned on everywhere we went? Like, how cool would that be? And she was like, oh, damn. But it's like, we're conditioned to think like being turned on there's something wrong with that. And this, sexual energy we have, it's like this God-given, source-given fuel for us. It's like our flame, and it's there with us 24/7, and it's free, and we can access it, So why don't we tap into it more? And when we tap into that, that fuels everything in our life. And the pleasure component, it's the most beautiful exchange we can have with ourselves or with a partner.
Yeah. And it doesn't need to always be in the bedroom. Bringing pleasure into our daily life of, seeing beauty as you're going for a walk, and that brings pleasure. And being, I think, Layla talks about this, and also like Mama Gina, is just living life turned on. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean you're walking through life on the verge of an orgasm all the time. Mm-hmm. You just like you said, you are feeling this vital force, life force energy within your body at all mm-hmm. times. That's that sexual energy. And our bodies, especially women's bodies, I mean, right, that our clitoris is just there for pleasure. Mm-hmm. That's its only purpose. And it's more than just that little bump we see. It's actually a pretty
so much
big,
more.
Right. I usually have one on my desk, but it's not here. But yeah, so I love how you're just so passionate about bringing education to anatomy as well, because mm-hmm. For boys and girls to understand. And I mean I'm under the belief that women's pleasure has been shut down because men, I don't want to say men, but the patriarchy mm-hmm. was afraid of it. Mm-hmm. It was too powerful. Mm-hmm. So that's why, we don't get taught about where our pleasure points are, or where it's okay, the freedom to walk around in a state of turn on and ecstasy all the time, because there's power in that.
100%. And when I think of being turned on, another word that comes to me is activated. Like we are 100% activated in who we are. And I like how you clarified patriarchy versus just men, because there are women in this construct of patriarchy that feel threatened by activated and turned on women. Mm-hmm. And it's, it's this conditioning and these stories. And I've stepped out into some really big spaces talking about sexuality and pleasure, and overall been really well received. But there's been some haters, and it's always kind of fascinating to me when they're women. And it's like, ooh, yeah, I used to be like you too. I was really shut down and really disconnected, and I would have really been threatened by me also. Right. And I hold the space for them to be able to heal and to rise up and to do some of that healing work, because I was so shut down and disconnected, Deanne, that and stuck in that masculine, that I did judge other women, and I was really threatened by it. And I know better now. And that's kind of how this work goes. Once, you don't know what you don't know, but holding the space for those women who are coming a little bit behind us, and pulling them up with us when we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely a mission that I feel is part of my work, is to, and that's part of one of the, part of this podcast. It's the remembering, right? It's like, I used to too. I was like, you see a woman come in, wherever I was, and, I'm like, oh, look at her. She's so flamboyant, and, she's just asking for attention, and, what's up with her? And, she thinks she's just the cat's meow. And it's like, hell yeah.
And now you're like, hey, I'm Deanne. What's your name?
Right. Yeah, I am the cat's meow. Let's go have fun. But yeah, but you're right. It's because, so I really want women to see that if you do notice yourself doing this with other women, to just kind of take a step back and, no judgment between the woman or yourself, but like, what is about this person that is triggering me right now? Is it because I sense she's too free? Okay, so maybe where in my life am I not allowing myself freedom? Where do I feel stuck? And so we're all mirrors to each other, and we offer each other just, different infinite possibilities of who we can become.
Yeah, and I also, I want to touch on the shame and guilt around women's pleasure. So much ancestral, generational, cultural shame and guilt, and really normalizing that women should be allowed to have pleasure and embrace that. And that starts within us, but it's also how you talk to even your kids, your partners. I have two teenage daughters. They're younger than yours, but I've normalized it in our house, and their friends ask me all the time, sex questions, pleasure questions. And I wouldn't have been comfortable talking about it until I got really comfortable in my own skin with it. And so many moms will come to me and say, I don't know how you talk to these teens about it. And I was like, yeah, I had to do the work on myself first. And I always come back to, like, that's all we can do is the work on ourselves. We can't change anybody else around us. But as we do the work on ourselves, other people shift. We change the dance when we change our steps. And normalizing sexuality and pleasure. And, even my partner now, he was like, I've never known anyone like talk to their kids so openly about sex. And I'm like, well, yeah, like, how do you feel about that? And he's like, well, right. Like, why do we talk to our kids about everything else but sex? And especially when sex is such a big part of our existence. And I'm like, right. Like, just because you're uncomfortable because your parents didn't, like, I would have loved to have been able to ask my mom questions or come to her and have open, honest conversations. So it's really been beautiful to create those ripples and have it be different for future generations, at least in my home.
Yeah, well, I celebrate that, because you're right. I mean, everything else is talked about, but something that's also part of life gets shunned away, and then children get a certain, oh, is it bad to talk about this? Is that something bad about myself?
Exactly.
And that's not true. And when it's done in a healthy way, I mean, I think people have this, judgment towards sexuality because they see the dark side of it in society. But that's because those people doing this dark stuff have been suppressed, and this is, it has to come out, right? We as we push
some
things
form
down
or
in
another.
ourselves, it's gonna come out sideways if it gets pushed down too much, right? And let's hold a safe container for it to be addressed in a healthy way, so it doesn't come out in that unhealthy way that hurts other people as well as that person.
Yeah, when you were saying that, I was visualizing like trying to hold a beach ball underwater, right? And like trying to suppress it and hold it, and eventually it's going to fly one direction or another, hit someone in their face or whatever. And when we normalize the talk too, I feel like it really is healing. And across the board, it's been proven the more education people have, the better choices they make. So some people are like, well, if you talk to your kids about sex, they're going to go have sex. I'm like, well, kids are going to have sex whether we talk about it or not. So I'd rather help them navigate safer sex, whether that's emotionally or physically. Let's support them. We've had experiences that we can help guide them on. And even with grown women, I facilitate a divorce women's group. And since we've started, we have 3 people now dating and they're navigating sex again. You remember what that was like right out of a marriage? It's scary, and to be able to like have a safe space to ask questions and process and talk about it. It's a huge part of what they're going through. And it should be normal. Like, once it becomes normal, it's really easy to see how weird it is that it wasn't normal.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think sometimes when something's not talked about, it gets talked about more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If it was just a natural thing, we wouldn't be putting so much energy and focus. It's just a natural part of life. It's like, eating or breathing. It's
like going topless in Europe. Going topless in Europe is so normal. No one looks at the boobs. Everybody's just topless on the beaches. Here, if someone goes topless, it's like, oh my gosh, look at that topless woman. Look at her boobs. It's like some places it's just normal. No one even notices it.
Yeah. Wow. There's so much we can keep going into. So, what you said about emotion, I think that's really important to address because, when you first said emotion, I'm like, oh yeah, women, that's, that is a big thing. I think, women get a lot of, when we have sexual union, we tend to get very attached, but also men as well, right? There's emotions. Certain men are very attached in an emotion. And when sex is not consensual, or there's a discord in it, it affects both parties emotionally. That can go actually much more deeper than a physical wound. Yeah.
And this is also part of that education piece. Most people I know have had sexual experiences where they get caught up in it and it's not fulfilling. It's like, oh, if I could do that again, I wouldn't have done it. And then we have that shame and that guilt and that yuckiness, like, oh, I can't believe I did it. And, processing through it. And I'll tell you, a lot of times people have those experiences because they're horny and they're not practicing self-pleasure. It's like all of a sudden someone touches them and it's like, oh my God, I want more of that because they're so starved of it in their life. And again, that brings us back to like, honoring your own body first and foremost. And when you're really connected to that space, your temple becomes so much more sacred. And you don't want the scraps and the crumbs that, a casual hookup would give you. And no judgment against that. There's a time and place for that, but it's then when you feel the ickiness afterwards that it can be so damaging and so hard to get over. And you don't want to talk about it because you feel bad and you feel gross. So I think it really comes back to, again, being connected to yourself first and foremost for men and women.
Love it. And I think we're going to actually pause there at the end of this circle together. Just have a couple more minutes, and I want to make sure that people get information on how to connect with you, maybe where to get the seeker if they're interested in learning more.
Perfect. Thank you. You can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn under my name, Daphne Paras. And my website is sacredseeker.com. It has all my offerings. And under Sacred Sexuality, you can find The Seeker and orgasmic socks, which are always fun to wear because women are scientifically proven to be more orgasmic when they're wearing socks.
Gotta warm up the tootsies.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, dear friend. Definitely, we need to come back on because there's so much more we can go into that is of so much importance and interest to women. out there. So thank you for being here with me today. Next week is Thanksgiving, dear ones. So we will have an encore of my personal Unbridled Journey episode. And the following week, I would love you for joining me with my guest, Dagmar Khan. She's an expert in women's pelvic floor health and wellness. So really coincides a lot with what we've been talking about here. So as we close today, I just want to wish everyone a peaceful Thanksgiving filled with all that brings you love and joy. And I am so grateful for this opportunity to share life with you. And may you all be showered with many blessings, as well as you, my dear Daphne. Much love to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deanne. Thank you for the amazing work you're doing in the world.
Yes, thank you. All right, we'll talk to you all next week.